I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
What really happened between Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung? One was a martial arts legend whose speed and philosophy changed cinema forever. The other was an unstoppable wall of muscle and mystery. But behind the flying kicks and shredded torsos is a story so shocking and unexpected. For decades, there have been whispers in Hollywood and rumors in martial arts circles about Bolo Yeung, the muscle-bound villain from Enter the Dragon, and the legendary Bruce Lee. What really happened between these two legends? Was their friendship as real as it seemed, or was there something darker behind the scenes? Bolo Yeung has had a lot to say about Bruce Lee, and what he's revealed is so shocking and extremely heartbreaking. The rise of Bolo Yeung. To understand the shocking confessions about Bruce Lee, you need to understand who Bolo Yeung really is and why his words carry so much weight today. Let's get one thing straight. Bolo Yeung didn't grow up with fame, fortune, or connections. In fact, he had none of that. The Bolo Yeung we all know today actually entered the world as Yeung Si in Guangzhou, China, back in 1946. And back then, life was anything but easy. His family wasn't rich, and he was born into a time of political chaos, poverty, war, tension, and uncertainty. But instead of letting that unfortunate environment weigh him down, he made a decision that would change his entire life. At just 10 years old, he discovered Chinese martial arts. And when we say discovered, we mean he became obsessed with it. He would spend hours just watching local kung fu masters practice in parks. And while other kids were busy playing, he would spend his time mimicking moves. He also enrolled under several martial arts masters. But here's the twist. He wasn't just into the moves alone, he was actually fascinated by the discipline behind it. The idea that a weak kid could train his body and become powerful, that was what got him interested. And that's exactly what Bolo did. However, some reports claimed that his parents weren't exactly supportive of his martial arts dreams because they thought it was just a phase. But he kept training and quietly building himself up. But then something else caught his eye. Bolo became interested in bodybuilding. But remember that this was the 1950s, and China wasn't exactly pumping out gyms on every corner. However, Bolo managed to keep going. At just 16 years old, he started lifting makeshift weights like stones, metal, and scraps, basically anything he could find. At that time, there was no protein powder and no fancy gym. All he had was just raw determination. And in a few short years, he had changed completely. But Bolo wasn't just trying to escape the limitations in his environment. He was also trying to escape a country that had so many restrictions on personal freedom. Back in the 1960s, China was under communist rule and didn't offer much room for dreamers. The government controlled everything, and the arts weren't exactly a priority. Bolo, with his dreams of stardom, realized that his future wasn't in mainland China. If he wanted a shot at fame, he had to leave. So, he made the bold and dangerous decision to leave China and head to Hong Kong. It wasn't just about politics, it was also about having the freedom to chase his dreams. At that time, Hong Kong was under British rule, and it was a hub for the film industry, especially for martial arts movies. But getting to Hong Kong wasn't easy. There were risks involved, but Bolo took them, knowing it was his only chance. In the early 1960s, Bolo and his family moved to Hong Kong, and that's when things really started to shift. He entered the Mr. Hong Kong bodybuilding competition, and not only did he compete, he actually won. Again and again. In fact, he was Mr. Hong Kong for nearly 10 years straight. People started recognizing his physique everywhere, and his muscles were impossible to ignore. And that's when a new identity was born. Do you know that the name Bolo came from one of his early film roles, and it stuck? From then on, Yeung Si became Bolo Yeung, and the world was about to meet a brand new kind of martial arts star. In the early 1970s, Bolo got his big break. His first major movie was The Wandering Swordsman, where he made his screen debut. But don't be mistaken. He didn't get cast for just his acting skills. Bolo's size and presence on screen were undeniable, and what made him stand out was his massive physique and intense gaze. He wasn't just some background guy, he was actually a force on screen. However, in those early days, Bolo wasn't given big scripts or heroic roles. He was cast as the muscle-bound villain, the thug, the henchman. Why? Well, because he was simply too muscular to play the underdog hero. Producers wanted him to be the guy who scared the hero, not the hero himself. And Bolo didn't complain. Instead, he leaned in and he perfected the act of being silent, menacing, and deadly. It wasn't long before he could steal a scene with just one cold stare. And even though the parts were small, his presence was always massive. People couldn't stop talking about the muscular villain who moved like a kung fu master. But here's the thing. Bolo didn't just want to be a typical villain. In fact, off-screen, he wasn't anything close to a villain. He wasn't cocky, loud, or even remotely threatening. Instead, he was quiet, soft-spoken, and, believe it or not, quite shy. He wanted more than just being the bad guy with no depth. And so, he decided to redefine what it meant to be a villain in martial arts films. He brought intelligence, strategy, and complexity to his roles. He wasn't just a punching bag for the heroes to beat up. He became someone who could challenge them, both physically and mentally. But while Bolo was carving out his spot in the Hong Kong film industry, he had no idea that a fateful meeting was right around the corner. One that would completely change his path. Because in 1973, a man named Bruce Lee came into his life, and everything shifted. Crossing paths with Bruce Lee. Do you know that Bolo and Bruce's very first meeting wasn't on some flashy film set? It was actually on a Winston cigarette commercial shoot. And that's where the story of these two legends really began. What happened on that commercial shoot was the spark that lit a brotherhood in martial arts. The moment they met, there was something that clicked, and they both gained instant respect for each other. But don't forget that they weren't just two random actors in a commercial. Bolo, at the time, had already carved out his own path in martial arts and bodybuilding. He was a dominant figure in his own right. But when he laid eyes on Bruce Lee, a different kind of respect was born. Bruce wasn't just some actor, he was the real deal. An innovator and a pioneer. Bolo could tell that Bruce had the kind of speed, agility, and precision that could rival even the best of martial artists. On the other hand, Bruce wasn't just looking at Bolo for his sheer physical presence. Bruce knew what it took to be truly exceptional in martial arts. And what he saw in Bolo was a guy who wasn't just strong, but was also a true martial artist. Someone who understood the art and science behind every movement. They were drawn to each other's unique approach to fighting and the fact that they both shared the same vision of pushing the limits of what the human body could do. From there, their relationship evolved quickly. They didn't just shake hands and call it a day. Instead, they became training partners. Bolo and Bruce would spend hours working together, sharing techniques and challenging each other. Bruce, with his precision and lightning-fast moves, would push Bolo to refine his agility. Meanwhile, Bolo, who was built like a tank, helped Bruce with his strength, showing him how to harness his power in ways Bruce hadn't explored before. This wasn't just about learning each other's moves. It was also about learning to combine their strengths. Bruce's speed and agility met Bolo's raw power in a way that was nothing short of incredible. The more they trained together, the stronger their bond became. And it wasn't just about the physical stuff either. They also bonded over their shared martial arts philosophy. Both Bolo and Bruce were constantly searching for the truth in martial arts, digging deep to discover the pure essence of the craft. Because it wasn't just about winning fights, it was also about mastering themselves. Bruce Lee wasn't just a fighter, he had an eye for on-screen presence. So when he began putting together the cast for Enter the Dragon, he had no doubt in his mind that Bolo would do great. He wanted Bolo, not as some random goon in the background, but as a true physical force that would stand out on screen, even next to him. And remember, Bruce didn't just star in Enter the Dragon. He was deeply involved in the casting and choreography as well. And that's how Bolo landed the now legendary role of Bolo in the movie. Yes, they literally named the character after him, and that reportedly wasn't in the original script. But don't think it was just business between these two. It was also personal. Behind the cameras, things weren't all smooth sailing. Bruce Lee, as we all know, was a perfectionist, and he insisted that the fight choreography had to be flawless. Every punch, every kick, every move had to be executed with precision, and Bruce wasn't willing to settle for anything less. This meant they had to practice dozens of takes to perfect the scenes. It wasn't easy, and both men had to give everything they had to make it work. Bruce would push Bolo to get his movements sharper, faster, and more precise. Meanwhile, Bolo would challenge Bruce to dig deeper and bring out more of his physical strength. By the time the filming wrapped on Enter the Dragon, Bruce and Bolo were already talking about future projects. In fact, reports revealed that Bruce even hinted that he wanted to create a film where the two of them would actually fight one-on-one. It would have been iconic. But then, just weeks before the film's release, the world was hit with the extremely devastating news of Bruce Lee's passing. For Bolo, the loss wasn't just professional. It was personal. He had lost a friend, a partner, and a man who had seen his potential before anyone else did. For decades, Bolo stayed quiet about Bruce, rarely ever digging into the emotions behind their friendship. However, we finally know what Bolo truly thinks about the man Bruce Lee was. And it's not what you would expect. Bolo's revelations about Bruce Lee. To the world, Bruce Lee was untouchable. He had the fastest kicks, the sharpest strikes, the perfect body, and the ultimate screen presence. But Bolo Yeung saw something different, something most people never got the chance to. Yes, Bruce Lee was brilliant, but behind the brilliance was pain, pressure, and an intensity that sometimes seemed inhuman. So when Bolo finally opened up about his time with Bruce, he had more to say than just the fights and films. Bolo doesn't throw compliments around lightly. Everyone knows he's built his entire life on discipline, respect, and strength. So when he says someone was on another level, you better believe it meant something. And that's exactly how he talks about Bruce Lee. For Bolo, it wasn't just about Bruce's famous kicks or lightning-fast punches. It was about his entire approach to life, his commitment, his hunger, and his refusal to settle for anything less than perfection. He said Bruce trained with a kind of intensity that most people would find too much. But to Bruce, it was very normal. In fact, he noted that Bruce had this energy and focus that filled the room. When Bruce walked on set, the atmosphere changed. People stood straighter, the crew got quieter, and everyone knew that this wasn't just a movie star walking in. This was a man with purpose, a man who meant business. But here's where things get a little complicated, because when he was asked about older martial arts or action films, like that of Bruce's, compared to modern action films, Bolo didn't hold back. He's made it clear that most modern martial arts and action films are now diluted and not as realistic as they used to be. His frustration is clear. He's not impressed by flying superheroes or gravity-defying stunts done on green screens. To him, the magic of Bruce Lee was that he didn't pretend to be strong. He was actually strong. His power wasn't computer-generated. It came from sweat, pain, and thousands of hours of real training. Now, he's not saying modern actors aren't talented, but Bolo believes the essence of martial arts and the soul of it are missing in today's blockbusters. Instead of raw physical discipline, it's just quick cuts and post-production tricks. According to Bolo, Bruce made sure that everything in Enter the Dragon looked as real as possible. There were no gimmicks or shortcuts. Bruce was obsessed with making the fights look authentic. And maybe that's why the movie still holds up today. But that's not all. It turns out that when you go deeper into the world of Bruce Lee's actual routine, you'd be fascinated. You see, Bolo didn't just watch Bruce work. He actually saw how he lived. Let's start with diet. Bruce was extremely strict about what he ate. According to those close to him, his philosophy was simple: fuel the body like a machine. There was no need for junk food or unnecessary sugars. Instead, he focused on clean, powerful food. He ate lean proteins, like chicken, beef, and fish. His meals were often paired with fresh vegetables, whole grains, and fruit. And guess what? He actually loved Chinese food, but only the healthy kind. Bruce was so intentional about making sure that every meal helped him move faster, hit harder, and recover quicker. Then, when it came to training, Bruce literally left everyone behind. Most people think of him just doing martial arts drills or sparring. But it turns out that Bruce actually trained in everything. There was resistance training, isometrics, cardio, flexibility, strength, and endurance. He had full-body routines that included body weight movements, dumbbells, barbells, and even grip trainers for his hands. He didn't focus on just the big, showy muscles. He trained the small stabilizer muscles as well, the ones that keep you balanced and give you real power. And perhaps what made Bruce so explosive was the fact that he didn't just punch fast. He punched with perfect control. His workouts weren't short either. Apparently, Bruce could train for hours non-stop. He'd break down each movement, analyze it, refine it, and do it again, over and over, until it felt like second nature. Which brings us to maybe the most surprising part of Bruce's routine, his mental training. You see, Bruce wasn't just strong physically, he was also mentally unstoppable. Every day, he practiced visualization. He'd close his eyes and picture his moves, not just going through them, but mastering them. He'd see his opponent, plan the attack, predict the counters, and run the whole fight in his head before stepping on the mat. He also meditated a lot. Bruce believed in inner calm, clarity, and focus. He once said, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water." That wasn't just a quote, it was basically how he lived. Bruce trained his willpower, just like his biceps. He read books on philosophy, psychology, and even poetry. He wasn't trying to become just a better fighter. He was also trying to become a better human being. And Bolo admired this deeply. He knew that Bruce's power and discipline came from mastering the mind before the body. But there's something else Bolo never forgot. It turns out that Bruce was way ahead of his time. Not just in fitness or philosophy, but in how he saw the world. Bruce didn't believe in limits, and he applied this logic to almost everything in his life. He challenged Hollywood, tradition, and almost everything. While others were trying to fit in, he was rewriting the rules. And the most impressive part is that he made it look easy. Bruce Lee was a phenomenon. Even now, decades later, Bolo still carries the lessons and still honors the man who changed his life and the world. But what fans didn't see, what the cameras never caught, was the intense pressure, pain, and personal battles Bruce faced behind the scenes. Underneath all the fame and fire, Bruce Lee was human. And his journey wasn't just about triumphs. It was full of quiet struggles, the kind he rarely talked about, but yet shaped every part of his life. Bruce Lee's hidden struggles. Many people do not know this, but Bruce had to fight to be seen. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Hollywood wasn't exactly ready for an Asian leading man. The idea of a Chinese actor starring in a major American production was almost unheard of. Bruce had the charisma, he had skill, and everything, but yet the doors stayed shut. Studios saw him as too foreign for American audiences. They wanted his martial arts, but not his face and accent. That's why he was asked to train white actors like Steve McQueen and James Coburn, while being told he couldn't carry a film himself. He was the best in the room, but was treated like he wasn't enough. Even the show Kung Fu, which was clearly based on his own ideas, went to David Carradine, a white actor with no martial arts background. Bruce had pitched the concept, But the role was given to someone else because executives thought his thick accent wouldn't work with the film. That rejection haunted him. But instead of backing down, Bruce doubled his efforts. He returned to Hong Kong, not as a failure, but as a man on a mission. And that's how films like The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and eventually Enter the Dragon were born. Another hidden struggle Bruce rarely spoke about was his identity. He was born in San Francisco, but raised in Hong Kong, and this meant that he often felt like he didn't fully belong in either place. In Asia, some saw him as too Western, while in America, he was constantly reminded that he was foreign. But Bruce didn't let all that get to him. He didn't just break cultural barriers, he carried them on his shoulders every day. He wasn't just fighting for roles or for himself. He was fighting for representation for people who looked just like him, for dignity and for respect. And sadly, the weight of all that never really left him. Bruce often talked about self-expression and individuality, but what he didn't say as openly was how isolated he sometimes felt. He was doing something no one had done before. There was no blueprint, there was no guidebook, and there was definitely no one to lean on. Bruce was blazing a trail, but sadly, trails are lonely when you're the first. While Bruce looked invincible on screen, his body was quietly breaking down behind the scenes. You see, he trained with an intensity most people couldn't imagine. But at the end of the day, the human body has limits, even when driven by sheer willpower. In 1970, Bruce suffered a severe back injury that almost ended his career. During a routine training session, he tried a good morning exercise with too much weight, and he felt something tear. It turned out he had seriously damaged a sacral nerve in his lower back. Doctors reportedly told him he might never kick again and that he should stop martial arts entirely. For Bruce, that news wasn't just painful, it was devastating. Because martial arts wasn't just his job, it was his identity. But instead of just sitting by and feeling sorry for himself, Bruce slowly built himself back up. He didn't just recover, he rebuilt himself from the inside out. But even after the injury healed, the pain never completely left him. He carried that discomfort into every scene, every performance. Yet, not once did he let the audience see him wince. Some insider reports revealed that Bruce didn't know how to rest. Every waking hour was spent perfecting his craft. He believed in pushing himself to the edge. But that kind of intensity comes with a cost. During the filming of Enter the Dragon, he was not only starring, he was also choreographing the fights, guiding the camera work, and even editing scenes. He was everywhere at once. It was his dream project, and he wanted every frame to reflect his vision. But that meant barely sleeping, constantly working, and living on sheer adrenaline. And slowly, it started to show. Bruce began losing weight. His face looked sharper. His body was still shredded, but he began to look thin. People close to him started to worry, but Bruce brushed it off. His body was wearing down, and his heart was under pressure. Most people don't recognize that Bruce Lee wasn't just a global superstar. He was also a husband and a father, and that came with its own set of challenges. He loved his wife, Linda, and adored his children, Brandon and Shannon. But sadly, fame is a thief of time, and this meant that the more successful Bruce became, the less time he had for his family. He traveled constantly, he trained endlessly, and he worked night after night to build something greater than himself. And while he tried to give his family a comfortable life, he also missed out on many ordinary moments. There's a quiet tragedy in that, because Bruce was working so hard to secure their future, yet he didn't always get to enjoy their present. In the final months of his life, Bruce's hidden struggles started catching up with him. He had been working non-stop. He was thinner than ever, and he had even collapsed once while working on a project and complained of headaches and seizures. The doctors were concerned, and he was told to rest, but he didn't stop. And then, on July 20th, 1973, at just 32 years old, Bruce Lee was gone. The official cause was said to have been cerebral edema, which is the swelling of the brain. But to this day, many people still debate the details and the unanswered questions. What we do know is that Bruce Lee lived like a firework. He burnt bright, moved fast, and left a legacy that never faded. Bruce Lee's impact on Bolo. Even decades after Bruce Lee's death, Bolo Yeung still speaks about him with awe, not just as a martial artist, but as a man whose impact is still rippling through generations. To Bolo, Bruce was more than a co-star. He was a force, a living legend. And even now, with Bolo well into his 70s, he says there's never been another like Bruce. Bolo knew the man behind the legend. The Bruce who didn't just throw perfect kicks, but who carried an entire culture on his back, who walked into every room knowing he had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously. Bolo has always said Bruce wasn't just a great fighter, he was also a visionary, and a man who understood the world in a way most people didn't. His discipline was next level, his focus was unmatched, and he had this ability to break down complex ideas and turn them into something powerful. Before Bruce, there were almost no Asian leads in Western films. Martial arts was treated like a joke, but Bruce came in with raw skill, intellect, and presence, and suddenly the whole world was paying attention. Bolo knew exactly what that meant. He'd spent years in the industry playing henchmen and villains, never the hero. But after Enter the Dragon, the rules changed. Not just for him, but for every Asian actor, every martial artist, and every outsider who had been waiting for their moment. To Bolo, Bruce's legacy isn't just about the movies or the martial arts. It's about the mindset he left behind. He taught people to train harder, to think deeper, and to believe in themselves, even when the world didn't. And that's why he meant so much to Bolo, because he didn't just make action films, he also made people feel strong. He gave kids around the world a role model who looked like them, moved like them, and showed them that greatness didn't have to come from tradition or privilege. It could come from within. Bolo Yeung has never forgotten that. He spent his entire career honoring Bruce's legacy, not by copying him, but by continuing the fight, by pushing authenticity, and by reminding fans that real martial arts is about truth, not tricks. He once said, "There will never be another Bruce Lee. I am privileged to have had the honor of calling him my friend." But what do you think? Was Bruce Lee's greatest legacy his fists or his mind? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting videos and untold stories.